Get ready, because what you're about to uncover isn't something everyone can grasp. This goes way beyond noticing angel numbers or downloading meditation apps. What's happening in you right now is something sacred, something only a rare few on this planet ever get to experience. This isn't just about becoming spiritually curious. It's about carrying a calling you were born with, a mission to help lead others out of confusion and back into truth. You might not even be fully aware of it yet, but the signs are already showing. You felt something different inside you, a subtle spiritual shift that quietly separates you from the rest. It's not loud, it's not flashy, and honestly, most people completely miss it. But for those who feel it, this one quiet sign begins to change everything. The way you think, the way you feel, the way you see yourself and the world around you, it all starts to shift, like something inside you is slowly waking up. And at first, it's confusing. You might think you're just tired, or burned out, or going through a weird phase. But it's not confusion, it's activation. It's your soul remembering who you really are. And the reason this moment is so rare is because not everyone is built for it. This type of awakening doesn't show up for the average person. It only reveals itself to those with a spiritual strength to carry something far bigger than themselves. If this has been happening to you, know it's not a coincidence, and it's not temporary. It's a shift that marks the beginning of something entirely new. Because you're not just becoming more self-aware, you're being chosen. It usually begins in the most unexpected way. What with a flash of lightning or some dramatic life event, but in silence. In the in-between moments, driving to work, washing the dishes, scrolling your phone, and suddenly, out of nowhere, this thought hits you. This doesn't feel like my life anymore. You look at your job, your relationships, your goals, and even your identity. And it all starts to feel off, like none of it was ever really yours. You can't explain it, but you feel disconnected from the life you're living. You start to question everything. Why do I even care about this? Who told me this is what matters? When did I stop feeling alive? At first, you try to shake it. You change your routine, take a trip, dive into distractions, but the feeling only grows. What you're sensing is the collapse of your false self. This is the beginning of the breakdown, the unraveling of an identity that was built for survival, not for purpose. They'll stay asleep their entire lives, chasing approval and calling it peace. But for the chosen, once you feel it, you cannot unfeel it. There's no going back. And even if you try to return to the old life, it just won't feel right. Because this isn't a small change, it's a spiritual departure. It's your soul rejecting everything that's fake, shallow, and misaligned. Then comes the second shift. Stronger, more personal. It hits your relationships. People you used to feel close with suddenly feel distant. Conversations you used to enjoy now feel forced. You sit across from someone you've known for years, and it's like you're speaking a different language. This isn't arrogance. It's not you thinking you're better. It's vibration. Your energy is changing. And when that happens, not everyone around you will be able to match it. Some people you love will start pulling away. Others will misunderstand you. And spaces that once felt familiar will start to feel heavy. It's painful. It's lonely. This is the phase where many people give up their awakening just to feel connected again. But the ones who are truly chosen, they keep going. Because deep down, your spirit refuses to fake it anymore. This phase isn't about rejection, it's about realignment. The universe is rearranging the people in your life to match the person you re-becoming, not the person you used to be. And yes, it hurts, but it's also making room. Room for relationships that match your new frequency. Room for connections that are honest, deep, and spiritually aligned. Not long after, you'll notice something else shifting. The world starts to feel like too much, too noisy, too fast, too fake. Places you used to love, busy restaurants, loud events, crowded space, start to feel overwhelming. You might even wonder if you're becoming antisocial. But this isn't social anxiety. It's spiritual sensitivity. Your system is becoming finely tuned to a higher frequency. You can't unconsciously take in what you used to. You start to feel everything more deeply. People's emotions, their energy, even their unspoken intentions. And with that awareness comes the need for more quiet, more space, more nature. Not out of fear, but necessity. You may find yourself needing longer breaks from your phone, needing less noise, even needing to be more intentional about what you eat, listen to, and watch. This isn't weakness. It's purification. Your energy field is being cleared, prepped for something bigger than you. Because chosen ones don't just walk through the world, they feel it. And that sensitivity, that's not a flaw. That's your internal guidance system coming online. It's teaching you to guard your energy, to become more selective with your space, to stop saying yes when your spirit is clearly saying no. And as you move deeper into this awakening, something even more surprising begins to happen. The need to prove yourself starts to dissolve. You might still work hard. You might still chase goals. But the internal drive to compete, to be seen, to win at all costs, it fades. At first, this can be confusing. You might think you're losing your edge, but you're not. You're evolving. You're shifting from performance to purpose, from chasing approval to living in alignment. Your ego no longer needs applause. Instead, your soul wants to create, to serve, to express without needing the spotlight. This is when chosen ones start to stand apart without trying. While others seek fame, you seek meaning. While others chase influence, you pursue impact. And in that shift, something powerful happens. You no longer base your worth on your title, your following, or your income. You realize that your true value was never outside of you. It's always been in your truth. And now that your truth is leading, your life begins to align in ways you couldn't have planned. Soon, you'll begin to notice something even more strange. Time doesn't feel the same anymore. You'll check the clock, thinking only a few minutes have passed, and it's been an hour. Or the opposite tool, feel like hours have gone by, but it's only been 20 minutes. This isn't forgetfulness. It's not distraction. It's a shift in your consciousness. You're no longer fully anchored in linear time like everyone else. Most people live their lives by the clock meetings, deadlines, goals. They are ruled by the calendar and dictated by artificial structure. But once your soul starts to awaken, your internal compass stops responding to that rhythm. Time becomes fluid. You start to live fully in the now. The past begins to lose its grip. The future no longer pulls you with anxiety. You find yourself anchored in presence, this moment, and it feels both strange and powerful. You start to notice beauty in simple things again. A ray of sunlight across your room, the way the wind hits your skin, the silence between breaths. You are no longer living for the next thing. You are becoming the thing. That's why old goals start to feel hollow. The 5-year plan feels irrelevant. Not because you don't care, but because something inside you knows that presence holds more power than projection. This isn't laziness. It's not confusion. It's realignment. You reshifting from the need to control every detail of your future to an intuitive way of living, following what resonates instead of what is expected. You might find it harder to stick to strict routines or to force yourself into commitments that don't feel alive anymore. But this is part of the process. Your soul is recalibrating. And then there's the solitude. One of the biggest signs that you read truly awakening is that you start to crave being alone, not out of depression or social burnout, but out of a deep, quiet knowing that something important happens in stillness. It's like you need that empty space in your day just to breathe again, to think, to feel your own energy without being wrapped up in everyone else's noise. At first, it might feel weird. You might feel guilty for not being more social or productive. But slowly, you start to realize this isn't isolation. This integration. It's your system asking for space to sort through what's changing inside you. And the more you listen to that nudge, the clearer you become. You begin to see solitude not as loneliness, but as a sacred sanctuary, a place where truth begins to echo louder, where answers come not from effort, but from quiet awareness. And every time you emerge from that stillness, you feel different, more grounded, more clear, more in tune. That's because your nervous system is being reset. While the world is obsessed with noise, you're learning to listen to silence. It becomes your teacher. It's in the silence that you feel your next move. It's in the silence that your purpose begins to whisper. This is one of the strongest signs that you're not just awakening, you're being called. Because chosen ones don't always hear with their ears, they listen with their spirit. And solitude becomes the training ground where you learn to trust that deeper voice. As this quiet transformation unfolds, something powerful starts to rise in you. You may not be able to explain it, but you feel it. A tug, a pulse, a subtle but persistent sense that your life is meant for something more. Not more success, necessarily. Not more attention, but more purpose, more alignment, more truth. And the hardest part, you can't fully see the path yet. You don't have a clear job description. You don't know where it's all leading. You just know that the life you're living no longer fits. What once felt safe now feels stagnant. What once felt fulfilling now feels false. And no matter how much you try to rationalize it, your soul won't let you settle. This is the beginning of a deep identity shift. You not just changing your habits, you re-shedding entire layers of who you used to be. Your interests shift. Your ambitions evolve. The roles you once played with pride now feel like costumes. And as scary as it is, you begin letting go. Letting go of what no longer lights you up. Letting go of the image you worked so hard to build. Letting go of the expectations others placed on you. And the more you release, the lighter you feel. The more aligned you become. And even though there's no clear map ahead, there's something deeper anchoring you, a knowing, a sense that your purpose is unfolding in real time, not through control, but through clarity. You might start having dreams that feel more vivid. You'll hear a sentence or a word and feel like it is speaking directly to you. You'll meet someone at just the right moment. Find a message on a podcast or a video that confirms what you couldn't quite put into words. These are not coincidences. These are activations. Your spirit is pulling in what it needs to prepare for what's next. And the more you trust this flow, the more it flows to you. People, ideas, resources, confirmation, not forced, not chased, but attracted because your energy is aligning. This is what happens when you shift from doing to being. When you stop proving and start remembering who you are, why you're here, what you're meant to carry. And that knowing becomes your compass. You'll stop needing everyone to understand. You'll stop explaining your path to those who were never meant to walk it with you. You'll stop waiting for permission to become what God already called you to be, because now you're listening to a higher voice, a quieter voice, but one that speaks with power, with truth, with authority. And once that voice takes root in you, you'll never see the world the same again. This is when the final shift begins, the one that truly sets the chosen apart. The need to pretend dissolves. You can no longer fake small talk. You can't force a smile when your soul feels heavy. And you're not angrier, just done performing. You don't need to be liked. You don't need to be understood. You only need to be honest. Because the moment you begin living in truth, your energy speaks louder than your words. Some people will be drawn to it like a magnet. Others will be repelled by it. But none of that matters. Because now you're living in integrity. You no longer base your value on how people respond to you. You know your worth. And from that place, decisions become easier. Boundaries become natural. Peace becomes your new normal. Not because life got easier, but because you became clearer. You stopped acting like someone you're not. And in doing so, you became someone the world can't ignore. Not because you shouted, but because you stood in your light, unshaken, unhidden, unchanged. What begins to happen next is perhaps the most misunderstood but spiritually significant part of your journey. You lose your tolerance for anything that lacks depth. It's not that you're suddenly judgmental or overly serious. It's that surface-level living simply feels unbearable. You try to engage in small talk, but it feels exhausting. You go along with certain conversations, events, or routines, but internally, you feel hollow. Something inside you starts rejecting the shallow. Not because you're trying to be different, but because you are different now. The way your soul operates has changed. You no longer crave what once entertained you. You don't care about trends or gossip or fitting into some polished image. It doesn't fulfill you anymore. And when you look around, you start to feel a gap between what the world values and what your spirit truly needs. It's like you're standing in a crowded room, surrounded by noise, but longing for silence. You might even question yourself at first, wondering if you've become distant, cold, or antisocial. But what's actually happening is sacred. You're tuning in to truth. Your inner frequency no longer resonates with distraction. You're no longer satisfied with sugar-coated answers. You want the real connection, real purpose, real peace. And this kind of craving I senti, something you can manufacture it, s, something that awakens inside those who are chosen to live differently. And as you pull away from the surface, you begin to notice something you never paid much attention to before. Your body becomes more sensitive, more reactive, more attuned. Foods you used to eat now feel heavy. Loud environments start to feel jarring. Even technology, your phone, the news, the constant notifications can start to feel like an attack on your nervous system. It's not random. It's not you being too sensitive. It's your vessel aligning with your new level of spiritual clarity. Your body is no longer willing to carry what your soul is rejecting. And that includes emotional energy, too. You sense tension in a room before it's spoken. You feel people's energy and intentions before they even arrive. This can feel overwhelming at first, like you're carrying emotions that aren't even yours. But in time, you begin to realize it's not a burden, it's a gift. It's your ability to discern. It's your internal compass sharpening. And as that discernment grows, you begin to understand the importance of boundaries, not just physical ones, but energetic ones. You start to protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. You don't let just anyone into your space. You don't say yes just to be polite. You begin to filter your life through a new question. Does this align with who I am becoming? And anything that doesn't, you let go. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because when you're being prepared for purpose, clutter, spiritual, emotional, or physical, can no longer stay. Soon, you'll start to feel your own voice returning. Not the voice shaped by society, not the voice that tries to meet expectations, but your real voice. The one that whispers truth to you when no one's watching. The one that tells you the difference between fear and intuition. The one that reminds you who you are when the world tries to make you forget. You spent so much of your life performing, adjusting, editing yourself to be more acceptable. But now, that mask is too heavy. It no longer fits. So, you stop pretending. You stop shrinking. You stop apologizing for being too quiet, too deep, too different. Because you finally understand your difference is your direction. You weren't meant to blend in. You weren't meant to follow someone else's script. You were designed to walk a path that requires divine guidance. That's why you feel called to speak truth in rooms where silence is expected. That's why you feel drawn to create, to express, to lead in ways that can't be explained by logic alone. This is your soul reclaiming its power. And when that happens, your presence begins to shift things. People will notice. Some will admire it. Some will resist it. But none of that will matter, because you'll no longer be living for their approval. And now comes a critical point in your journey. Something almost every chosen one must face: the loss of old identity. This is deeper than quitting a job or ending a relationship. It's the death of who you thought you had to be. The version of you that was built on survival, performance, and pleasing others begins to crumble. And it's scary. Because for a moment, you feel like nothing. You feel like nothing is left. You're not who you used to be. But you're not quite sure who you're becoming. You're floating in the in-between. This space is sacred. It's the wilderness of transformation. You might feel disoriented, emotional, ungrounded, but don't run from it. Stay there. Breathe through it. Because this is where your true self begins to emerge. And in that emergence, you'll start to feel something you haven't felt in a long time more, maybe ever. Peace. Not the kind that comes from everything going right, but the kind that comes from no longer betraying yourself. You'll feel it when you make decisions that honor your intuition. You'll feel it when you choose rest over hustle. You'll feel it when you say no without guilt and yes without fear. That peace is proof that your alignment is working. As your old identity falls away, your new clarity gives birth to a radical kind of freedom. You're no longer weighed down by what others think of you. You're no longer trapped in cycles of guilt or shame. You forgive yourself more easily. You hold space for your emotions without judgment. You understand that healing isn't linear and awakening isn't always beautiful. But through it all, you stay present. You stop searching for the next step and instead start embodying the next version of yourself. You make space in your life, not to fill it with distractions, but to allow divine instruction to reach you. And when you least expect it, that instruction begins to come. Ideas, insights, nudges, they land softly, but with clarity. You begin to know what to do without overthinking. You feel drawn to certain places, people, paths, not because they're popular, but because they feel right. That's how you know you're moving from logic to intuition, from external plans to internal wisdom. And it's in that flow that you begin to experience what few ever do: true alignment. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this journey, you start to feel whole, not perfect, not finished, but whole as in you stop needing to be someone else to feel worthy. You stop chasing versions of yourself that were never real. You stop trying to earn what was always yours, love, clarity, purpose, peace. It was never outside of you. It was always within. But you had to be stripped of distractions to see it. You had to be emptied of lies to feel it. And now you're living from the inside out, grounded, present, clear. And that clarity, it simplifies everything. You start showing up differently in your conversations, in your choices, in your presence. You don't have to force anything anymore. You don't need to convince, explain, or defend. You just be. And that being is powerful. That being is rare. That being is remembering. And it's only the beginning. Something extraordinary begins to happen when you finally start walking in this new clarity. No longer look for signs. You become one. Before, you needed constant confirmation. You prayed for signs, begged for clarity, scrolled endlessly, hoping to see a quote or video that told you what to do next. But now, something shifts inside you. You don't need to chase validation anymore. The answers start coming from within. Your body feels the truth before your mind can explain it. Your peace confirms decisions more than people ever could. You realize that the very things you used to ask God to show you were already embedded in your own spirit. You just weren't still enough to hear them. Now you are. Now you listen before reacting. You observe before responding. You move when it feels right, not just when it looks right. This is where discernment replaces desperation. You no longer follow every opportunity because not everything that glitters is gold. You don't chase things that feel urgent but out of alignment. You understand now, not every door is meant for you. Some are distractions dressed as blessings. Some are delays disguised as opportunities. And you can feel the difference not through logic, but through energy. That's how powerful your inner compass has become. You begin trusting your no as much as your yes. You no longer apologize for pulling away from spaces or people that drain you. You don't explain your silence, your solitude, your sudden disinterest in things you used to entertain. Why? Because your peace is proof, and that peace is non-negotiable now. You protect it like sacred ground because it is. And with that protection comes responsibility. As a chosen one, your energy isn't just for you, it's for others. Whether you realize it or not, people feel you. They sense your shift. Your presence speaks before your mouth does. When you walk into a room, things shift. Not because you're trying to be impressive, but because you're aligned. Some will envy you. Some will feel uncomfortable around you. And at first, you might try to tone yourself down, to shrink so others don't feel small around your light. But eventually, you realize you are not responsible for how people respond to your healing. You're not responsible for the discomfort your growth creates in others. Because there will be moments where your evolution costs you relationships. Moments where your truth makes others project their fears onto you. Moments where your clarity makes you the target of people still lost in confusion. But through it all, you'll stand. Not because you're perfect, not because you have all the answers, but because your roots are deep now. And when your roots are deep, you don't fear the storm. You let it come. You let it shake. You let it strip. Because you know what's real will remain. And what isn't was never meant to go with you. And then comes another layer, new challenge. When you've grown, when you've shifted, when you've become someone your old world can no longer contain, you'll be asked to step into the unknown. And this is where many fall back. Because while spiritual growth feels enlightening, it also requires sacrifice. You may be asked to leave a job that provides security but suffocates your soul. You may be called to walk away from friendships or environments that once felt like home, but now feel like cages. You may be led to start something new, a business, a ministry, a creative path with no clear roadmap, no guarantee, no applause. And it will feel scary. But fear is not the enemy. Here stagnation is. You've outgrown your past, and now your spirit is restless in places that don't reflect your becoming. That restlessness isn't confusion, it's divine agitation. It's God nudging you, preparing you, pushing you into what you prayed for, but didn't know would cost this much. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it's uncertain, but so is anything sacred. So is anything real. Remember, every great move of God begins with a step into the unknown. Abraham didn't know where he was going, but he obeyed. Moses didn't feel qualified, but he answered the call. Esther didn't feel ready, but she stepped into the palace. And just like them, you may not feel prepared, but you are positioned. Your preparation didn't happen in public. It happened in the quiet, in the breaking, in the loneliness. And now you're being called to rise. And as you rise, you'll notice something beautiful. Your idea of success begins to change. Before, success was about recognition, achievements, being seen, being praised. But now, success is peace. Success is alignment. Success is waking up and feeling light, not burdened. It's being able to say, I'm proud of who I am becoming, even if no one claps. It's creating from the heart instead of hustling for likes. It's resting without guilt, saying no without guilt, living your truth even when it's not trendy. And when that becomes your standard, everything changes. You don't chase opportunity, you attract it. You don't beg for connections, you magnetize them. Why? Because the more aligned you become with who God designed you to be, the more favor follows you. Not because you manipulated the system, not because you compromised your truth, but because heaven trusts you now. You've been refined. You've been tested. You've been proven. And that process is fire. That fire. That valley. It wasn't punishment. It was preparation. It was God building your capacity for what's coming next. Because what's coming next isn't small. it's not safe, it's sacred. And sacred things require sacred vessels. That's who you are now. And this leads to the final realization of this stage. You are no longer waiting for a breakthrough. You are the breakthrough. You no longer asking God to change your situation. You realizing He changed you so you can change the situation. You stop waiting for external circumstances to improve because you've improved internally. And when the inside shifts, the outside has no choice but to respond. Your perspective changes. Your priorities shift. Your desires purify. You no longer need the world to confirm what you already know in your spirit. And that knowing, it frees you. It empowers you. It leads you. You don't walk with arrogance, but with quiet confidence. A grounded certainty that says, even if I don't know what tomorrow holds, I trust the one who holds me. That's how chosen ones walk, not with noise, but with presence, not with panic, but with peace. And that peace, it becomes your signature. Your energy begins to speak before your words do. People sense something different. They can't always name it, but they feel it. And what they're feeling isn't you, it's what's working through you. Because when you align with divine truth, you don't just change your life, you change the atmosphere. What happens next in your journey is what separates the seekers from the carriers. From the carriers, those who casually search for meaning, versus those who become vessels of purpose. Once you've aligned yourself with truth, once you've passed through the fires of awakening, solitude, shedding, and stepping into the unknown, the real test begins. How well can you hold the frequency of your calling? Not for a moment, not for a few good days, but consistently in the face of chaos, misunderstanding, and the pressure to return to who you used to be. This is where many stumble, not because they're weak, but because the world has a way of pulling at your old self. When your new self starts to rise, people will tempt you with comfort. Opportunities will tempt you with compromise. Maybe I'm not meant for this. Maybe I should go back to what's familiar. But chosen ones know there is no going back. Not because you burned bridges, but because your soul has evolved beyond the point of return. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you've felt. You can't pretend to be asleep when you've awakened. And even when that truth costs you convenience, connection, or certainty, you hold it. Because now you understand the weight you carry is sacred. And part of that sacred weight is realizing that your presence alone is disruptive. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're doing everything right. You're living authentically in a world addicted to illusions. You're speaking from the soul in rooms full of scripts. You're prioritizing inner peace in a society driven by noise. And that presence, it stirs people. It reveals things. It triggers hidden insecurities. It exposes false alignments. Some will accuse you of changing. Some will say you've become distant, arrogant, intense. But deep down, they're not reacting to your change. They're reacting to the mirror your change has become. You're showing them what's possible. But your job isn't to shrink so others feel safe. Your job is to embody the light God placed inside you, fully, freely, boldly. And yes, it's costly, but it's also what you were born for. To be a living example. To walk in such integrity that your life itself becomes a message, a ministry, a movement. And as your light grows, so will your responsibility. You'll find yourself carrying more and more emotional weight, more spiritual insight, more inner pressure to stay aligned. But here's the secret. The pressure is not punishment. It's preparation. It's God stretching your capacity, teaching you how to hold more without crumbling, teaching you how to walk in authority without arrogance, teaching you how to move with conviction and compassion at the same time. You may feel the tension between the old and the new, between comfort and calling, between the external noise and the internal knowing. But that tension is making you strong. It's refining your discernment. It's forcing you to depend on God in ways you never had to before. And that dependence, that's where your real power comes from. Not from having the right words, or perfect timing, or flawless plans, but from walking so closely with the Spirit that you move when He moves, speak when He speaks, and stay silent when He says wait. This is spiritual maturity. This is what it means to be trusted with divine influence. And influence, by the way, is no longer what it used to be. It's not about numbers, followers, applause. It's about impact. You begin to realize that one conversation led by truth can shift someone's entire trajectory. One post, one word, one act of obedience can ripple through timelines and generations. And so, you stop chasing attention and start cultivating presence. You become intentional with your energy. You begin to fast from noise, digital, emotional, relational, just to stay clear. You don't post to impress. You don't speak to be heard. You speak because there's fire in your bones. You speak because you can't not speak. You move because staying still would be disobedience. That's how you know you're being led. Not by ego, but by assignment. And every time you try to retreat, God reminds you why He called you in the first place. Not because you're perfect, but because you're willing. Not because you know everything, but because you've surrendered what you don't know. And that surrender, it turns your life into a vessel of divine flow. And here's the wild part. The more surrendered you become, the more favor finds you. Not the kind of favor that shows off, but the kind that sustains. Unexpected provision, unexplained peace. Doors opening without you knocking. People showing up to support you without you asking. This isn't magic, it's alignment. It's the result of living in rhythm with what your soul was created for. When you're truly in your lane, the lane becomes clear. The obstacles become lessons. The waiting becomes strengthening. The delays become divine edits. And you stop fighting the process. You stop resisting the pruning. You stop resenting the silence. Because now you see everything is happening for you, not to you. Every loss, every betrayal, every moment of confusion was part of the sacred dismantling of your false self. And now, in its place, stands someone real, someone resilient, someone ready. Not ready in the worldly sense, but ready in the spiritual sense, available, open, obedient. You start to notice how little things affect you now. You don't react like you used to. You don't overthink every comment, every delay, every perceived failure. You've built inner stability, not because life got easier, but because you got rooted. And that rooting allows you to move with quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need to prove, doesn't need to push, doesn't need to perform. You start making decisions from alignment, not anxiety, from clarity, not comparison. You stop looking at what everyone else is doing and realize you not even playing the same game. Your life isn't meant to follow trends. It's meant to set them. Your mission isn't to fit into the world's mold. It's to rebuild it with truth, love, and unshakable authenticity. That's the call. And the more you answer it, the more the noise fades. And finally, you begin to understand why the journey had to be so intense, why the silence felt endless, why the loneliness cut so deep, why the detours felt like dead ends. Because you weren't just being changed, you were being anchored. God wasn't just giving you insight. He was giving you roots. Roots that can't be shaken by criticism. Roots that don't waver under pressure. Roots that hold you steady when storms come, not if they come, but when. Because chosen ones don't live storm-free lives. Not because they're invincible, but because they've learned how to remain, how to abide, how to walk with God so closely that even when everything around them is falling apart, they remain centered, grounded, unmoved. And that unshakable presence, that's your ministry. That's your gift. That's what changes rooms. That's what heals people. Not your perfection, not your success, your presence, your energy, your essence. It's the invisible but undeniable weight of someone who has truly become who they were born to be. There is a moment in your spiritual journey where you stop searching for external proof and begin recognizing divine timing as its own language. You no longer in a rush to make things happen, because you've seen what happens when you force a door slammed shut. Energy drains, alignment disappears. You've learned that when it's from God, it flows. That doesn't mean it's easy. It means it comes with confirmation instead of confusion. And when things don't work out, you no longer spiral into panic or self-blame. Instead, you pause, you breathe. You ask, is this redirection or protection? And deep in your spirit, you hear the answer, even if your mind doesn't yet understand it. That's the kind of faith that makes you immovable. Because now, you don't live for speed, you live for alignment. You understand that divine timing often looks like delay to the untrained eye, but to those who are chosen, it's strategic. It's not, no. It's not yet, because what I have for you is bigger than what you're reaching for. And suddenly, you stop begging. You stop striving. You stop exhausting yourself for things that were never yours to begin with. You realize that sometimes the blessing is in the wait. Sometimes the breakthrough is in the stillness. And you begin to find peace, not in knowing what's next, but in knowing who's in charge of what's next. And with that realization comes an inner shift that can't be explained, but only felt. You no longer need to be busy to feel worthy. You begin to unlearn the addiction to hustle. The voice that once said, do more, prove more, be more, starts to fade, and in its place comes a gentler, stronger truth. You already are enough. That doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become intentional. You begin to measure your days not by how much you did, but by how well you stayed aligned. You trade productivity for presence. You let go of the need to constantly grind, and you step into the grace of divine rhythm. And in that rhythm, you find rest, not just physical rest, but spiritual rest. The kind that anchors you so deeply that even when the world spins fast, you remain slow, steady, sure. You start doing less, but creating more impact. You stop chasing numbers and start nurturing purpose. You begin to understand that you, Dan T, need to do everything. You just need to do the things that were meant for you. And that kind of focused obedience, it multiplies, it expands, it creates waves you may never even see, because true purpose doesn't need an audience, it just needs alignment. And soon, that alignment starts drawing people to you without trying, without strategizing. The right people begin to show up, people who see you, not just your image, people who resonate with your truth, not just your talent, people who match your energy, not just your ambition. And it feels unfamiliar at first, because you've spent so much of your life being misunderstood, overlooked, underestimated. But now, you're finally being seen. Not because you've changed yourself to be accepted, but because you've revealed yourself and let the right ones recognize you. And this is important, you begin to understand that your tribe doesn't need convincing. They find you when you're fully yourself. That's why pretending never worked. That's why dimming your light never attracted the love you craved. But when you stand in your truth, when you speak with integrity, when you operate from peace, not fear, you become magnetic. Not to the masses, but to the ones who matter. And when those people come, they come with clarity, not confusion. They come with peace, not pressure. They don't drain you, they activate you. That's how you know it's divine. And here, as where it gets even deeper, you begin to notice that the very things you used to pray for, you've now become. You used to pray for strength, and now you are strength. You used to pray for guidance, and now you're guiding others without even trying. You used to ask for healing, and now your presence carries healing for people who haven't even said a word. And that realization hits different. It humbles you. It grounds you. It reminds you that everything you went through wasn't just for your survival, it was for your assignment. You're walking proof that purpose can rise from pain, that clarity can emerge from chaos, that identity can be reborn from complete dismantling. And because of that, your life becomes a lighthouse, not loud, not flashy, but unmistakable. You shine from within. You don't need a spotlight. You are the light. And people can feel it. They may not always understand it, but they feel it. And more importantly, you feel it. You feel yourself becoming who you were always meant to be. Not a copy. Not a competitor, but a creator of something sacred and true. And in the midst of that sacred becoming, another truth rises. You start honoring your boundaries as a form of worship. You no longer see boundaries as walls. You see them as portals that protect your peace. You say no without apology. You step back without guilt. You stop over-explaining your choices because now you understand. Every time you say yes to misalignment, you say no to your assignment. And you're not willing to do that anymore. You've seen what it costs. You've felt the drain. You've watched yourself shrink to make others comfortable. And now, you choose differently. You choose truth over people-pleasing, alignment over approval, wholeness over performance. And that choice doesn't always come easy, but it always comes with freedom. And that freedom, it's addictive in the best way. You crave the peace that comes with choosing yourself. Not in a selfish way, but in a sacred way. Because you finally understand you can't pour into others from an empty spirit. You can't guide people into clarity while you live in confusion. You can't teach peace if you refuse to embody it. So you protect your energy not to withdraw from life, but to show up for it fully, truthfully, powerfully. And from that space of grounded power, you begin to co-create with the divine in ways that feel effortless. Your ideas flow. Your creativity expands. Your intuition sharpens. You wake up with clarity. You make decisions with ease. You don't second-guess your worth. You don't beg for permission. You don't doubt your place. You know you were born for this. And even when challenges command, they will you, don't fold. You don't panic. You don't retreat. You stand in your assignment with grace and grit. Because now, your faith isn't just belief, it's embodiment. It lives in your tone, your walk, your decisions. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to prove it. You just live it. And that living testimony, it does more than words ever could. You see, when you become this aligned, this centered, this unshakable, your life becomes a quiet revolution. You inspire not by effort, but by existence. You don't need to convince anyone. You simply be. And that being rooted, whole, authentic is the most powerful form of leadership. That's why God chose you, not because you're perfect, but because you were willing to be purified, not because you're loud, but because you carry depth, not because you had a plan, but because you had a yes. And that yes is still echoing. That yes is still unfolding. That yes is still opening doors no man can shut. And as long as you stay in that posture, surrendered, listening, aligned, nothing can block what's meant for you. Not the delays, not the detours, not even your own doubts, because the one who called you is faithful, and he's not finished. By now, you've realized something powerful. The transformation you've been undergoing wasn't just about healing old wounds or letting go of toxic patterns. It was a full system reset, a divine recalibration. You weren't just being shaped into someone better. You were being brought back to who you truly are, beneath the noise, the programming, the pressure. The chosen ones aren't made in the spotlight. They're formed in silence, in the unseen hours, in the moments of breakdown, confusion, and radical surrender. You've had to unlearn what you were taught to believe about yourself. You've had to question everything: your worth, your direction, your desires. And through it all, something sacred remained. Your yes. You kept saying yes. Yes to growth. Yes to release. Yes to release. Yes to becoming. Even when it was terrifying. Even when it felt like loss. Even when nothing made sense. And that, yes, that's what separated you. That's what qualified you. Because many people want the anointing, but few are willing to be emptied for it. Few are willing to be refined in fire. But you said yes anyway. And now, you're beginning to walk in the evidence of that obedience. It may not be flashy, it may not be loud, but it's undeniable. Your presence has changed. Your energy has shifted. You're not the same person, and thank God for that. And here's what's wild: people around you are beginning to feel it, even if they can't name it. Some are drawn to you in new ways. They sense your peace. They recognize your clarity. They feel safe in your energy without knowing why. Others, though, are pulling away. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your growth confronts their comfort. Your alignment disrupts their dysfunction. You've become a mirror, and not everyone wants to see themselves clearly. And this is where you must choose truth over familiarity. Not in anger, not in ego, but in love. Because chosen ones understand that love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes love is distance. Sometimes love is letting go. And you're learning that now. You're learning to bless people silently, to forgive without re-entry, to love without clinging. That spiritual maturity, that divine discernment, that's walking in wisdom. And as you do, the emotional clutter begins to fall away. The old cycles lose their grip. The constant need to explain, prove, convince it dissolves. Because your life is your evidence now. Your energy speaks louder than explanations ever could. And when you get to this place, this beautiful, raw place of alignment, you'll notice another shift. Your desires begin to purify. What used to excite you no longer does. What used to motivate you now feels empty. You're not lazy. You're just done chasing things that aren't yours. Your spirit is more selective now. It's not chasing every open door, waiting for the right one. It's no longer driven by fear or urgency. It's moved by resonance. That's how you know you're evolving. When you'd rather wait in peace than rush in panic. When you choose depth over distraction. When you'd rather build slowly in truth than quickly in ego. That shift is subtle, but it's everything. It means your inner compass is working. It means you've built the strength to hold vision without immediate validation. And in a world that praises speed and visibility, that kind of patience is radical. That kind of trust is rare, but you've earned it. You didn't skip steps. You didn't cheat the process. You allowed yourself to be undone and rebuilt by divine hands. And now, you're not just awake. You're ready. And what you ready for isn't just a new season, it's a new identity. One that's not based on performance, perfection, or pressure, but on purpose. You begin to walk differently not because you've arrived, but because you remembered. You remembered who you are, who you've always been, a carrier of light, a bringer of truth, a vessel for change. That remembrance changes your posture. You stand taller, you speak softer, but with more authority. You show up fully, not forcefully. You're no longer seeking permission, you're living in permission. The permission God already gave you when He called you chosen. And from that place, you begin to attract opportunities, relationships, and experiences that reflect your new frequency. Not because you're manifesting, but because you're aligned. You're not chasing, you're becoming. And that becoming is magnetic. That becoming is transformational. That becoming is exactly why the warfare was so heavy before. Because the enemy knew what was on the other side of your surrender. But you made it. You're still standing. And, more importantly, you're still saying yes. And now, something new is being required of you. Embodiment. Not just knowing the truth, living it, breathing it, speaking it, carrying it in how you move through the world. The days of playing small are over. The days of waiting for the right time, the right person, the right sign, they're done. This is the time. You are the vessel. The signal has already been given. Now it's about obedience. Obedience that doesn't always make sense. Obedience that stretches you. Obedience that requires faith, not confirmation. And that's where the next phase begins. You stop asking, what will happen if I do this? And start asking, what will happen if I don't? Because now you know when you delay your calling, you don't just slow your life down, you delay the lives you were meant to touch. You delay the people you were meant to awaken. And that realization becomes your fuel. You no longer move just for yourself. You move for the collective, for the lineage, for the future. Because your healing didn't stop with you out. When you walk with that awareness, you stop needing to be understood. You stop needing applause. You stop needing external proof of your progress, because everything you need is already within. The divine blueprint, the inner compass, the sacred fire, it's all there. And the more you trust it, the more natural your purpose feels. It's not forced anymore. It flows. You wake up with ideas you didn't ask for. You meet people who say the exact words you needed to hear. You step into rooms you didn't even know you were qualified for. And that's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's grace. That's what happens when you finally stop resisting and start receiving. Not from the world, but from God. That's when your timeline becomes supernatural. That's when you start experiencing acceleration, not because you're running faster, but because you've stopped running away. You're facing your path head-on, and everything that felt like a delay suddenly makes sense. The silence, the heartbreak, the stripping. It wasn't punishment, it was positioning. And finally, you realize the real reward of this entire journey. I senti what UV gained it as who UV become. You don't need a title to feel valuable. You don't need a stage to feel seen. You don't need validation to feel worthy, because you know. And that knowing is unshakable. It lives in your walk, in your decisions, in your peace, in your presence. And from that place, you stop searching and start serving. Not from depletion, not from obligation, but from overflow. Because you've been filled. You've been rebuilt. You've been prepared. Not for a season, but for a legacy. And now, you get to live it not in the future. Not when things are perfect, but right here, right now. Fully, freely, and fearlessly. There's a sacred calm that enters your life when you finally realize you don't have to force what S meant for you, and that peace becomes your new compass. It guides your decisions, filters your relationships, and sets the tone for how you carry yourself through every situation. You're no longer scrambling to prove anything, not your worth, your intelligence, or your loyalty, because you've made peace with the fact that what's real, 1T, required performance. That shift might seem subtle, but it transforms everything. You stop answering every call. You stop rushing to every invitation. You stop saying yes just to avoid guilt. And it's not because you reclosed off it. S, because you finally tuned in. You're listening to your spirit now, not your insecurities. You're led by discernment, not desperation. And in that space, you discover something powerful. Peace is louder than chaos when you learn to trust its voice. That peace doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're focused. You're no longer driven by urgency, but by alignment. You realize that if God isn't in it, it's not worth your energy. That clarity makes your no's stronger and your yeses sacred. And suddenly, your life begins to organize itself around what truly matters. And when that happens, you start moving differently, not just physically, but spiritually. You no longer try to find your path. You realize you are the path. Everything you've been through, every delay, every closed door, every moment of confusion has shaped you into a vessel that others can follow, not because you've reached perfection, but because you've been refined by pressure. And that refinement, it radiates. It's in your posture. It's in your presence. People can sense it before you say a word. And that presence, it speaks louder than any credentials ever could. Because you've lived what you teach. You've cried your way into wisdom. You've bled your way into clarity. You've healed your way into power. And now, people don't just listen to your words. They feel your life. They feel your stillness. They feel your peace. They feel your authenticity and they trust it. Because in a world full of smoke and mirrors, truth feels like oxygen. And you, chosen one, have become a living, breathing example of what truth looks like in motion. But this truth you carry didn't come easy. It was earned in the quiet moments when you chose stillness over distraction, surrender over control, faith over fear. And now you see the fruits of that inner labor. You're no longer thrown off by every delay or rejection. You've learned that sometimes God's greatest blessings come wrapped in confusion. You've seen how the no today protects the yes. You weren't ready to carry yet. You embrace it. You lean into it. You allow life to unfold with divine rhythm, knowing that what's meant for you won't miss you, not when you're aligned, not when you're faithful. And in that posture of trust, you gain something more valuable than any success or recognition: sacred confidence, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't seek applause, the kind that simply is, rooted, grounded, untouchable. You no longer strive for peace, our peace. You don't chase love, you embody love. You don't wait for purpose, you live purpose. That is the energy of someone who's been chosen and knows it. And from this grounded space, your vision becomes sharper. You begin to see what others overlook. You recognize divine setups in everyday moments. You hear God in places others hear noise. Your awareness expands, not just intellectually, but spiritually. You feel things deeper. You sense shifts before they happen. You pick up on energy with surgical precision, not to judge, but to navigate. You become a spiritual strategist, knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to move and when to rest, when to engage and when to walk away. This is the wisdom of the chosen. Not just knowing what to do, but knowing when to do it. Not just speaking truth, but discerning if it's the right time to speak. And in that discernment, you become powerful. Because now, your actions are intentional. Your words are precise. Your energy is preserved. You don't scatter yourself anymore. You conserve. You curate. You carry your light with strategy, knowing that the mission is too important to waste your energy on distractions. And that the other thing, you start to see distractions for what they really are: spiritual decoys, sent not to destroy you outright, but to delay your destiny just long enough to make you doubt your direction.
Oh, yes.
But now, your discernment is too sharp to fall for it. You can smell misalignment from a mile away. You can feel when something is off, even if it looks perfect on paper. And you trust that knowing, even when it doesn't make logical sense. That trust doesn't isolate you, elevates you. It puts you in the company of the rare few who don't just live by sight, but by spirit. And that company might be small, but it's powerful. Because when chosen ones link up with other chosen ones, everything changes. The synergy is unmatched. The energy is clean. The purpose is clear. The growth is accelerated. And those connections, they don't need constant maintenance. They don't need validation. They're soul deep, purpose lead, God ordained. And they last because they're not built on ego. They're built on truth. And in that truth, you become unapologetically yourself. You no longer edit your light to make others feel safe. You no longer dilute your wisdom to avoid sounding too much. You no longer question your gifts because someone else doesn't understand them. You own who you are, fully, freely, fiercely, and not in a performative way, in a grounded, humble, spirit-filled way. You know you're not better than anyone, but you also know you're not less. You're not here to compete. You're here to contribute. You're not here to be liked. You're here to liberate. And the more you walk in that identity, the more the world starts adjusting to you, not the other way around. You're no longer shape-shifting to be accepted. You're standing firm and letting what's real rise to meet you. That's the power of spiritual authenticity. It creates new realities simply by existing. And as this reality becomes your norm, you begin to carry something rare, emotional sovereignty. You stop outsourcing your peace to other people's opinions. You stop depending on external validation to feel secure. You stop giving your power away to anyone who can't hold it with care. Because now you know you are the steward of your own spirit. You are responsible for protecting what God has placed inside you. And you do it with love, with grace, with quiet confidence. You set boundaries, not out of fear, but out of reverence for your calling. You move intentionally because you know every step is sacred. You no longer react, you respond. You don't absorb energy, you observe it. And in that space of emotional clarity, you become untouchable, not in an arrogant way, but in a holy way. The enemy can't distract you with chaos anymore. The world can't bait you with empty promises. You're too aligned to be lured, too grounded to be shaken, too anointed to be manipulated. This is what preparation looks like. This is what spiritual mastery feels like. You're no longer surviving. You're no longer seeking. You're no longer seeking. You're receiving. You're no longer striving. You're embodying. And the most beautiful part, you're just getting started. All of this inner work wasn't the end, was the foundation. Now comes the expression. Now comes the overflow. Now comes the release of what's been stored inside of you for years. The gifts, the ideas, the messages, the impact, the anointing, time. You've been prepared in secret, refined in the fire. And now, the world is about to witness the result of a soul that said yes, again and again and again, when no one was watching. There is a moment you'll encounter on this path that feels like a deep breath before a divine release, a sacred stillness that lets you know something is shifting. Not around you, not through you. You'll sense it before you see it. You'll catch yourself pausing more often, double-checking your energy before responding, filtering your interactions more carefully, not out of fear, but out of understanding that what you carry is weighty. You're not casual anymore. You've stopped treating your calling like an option. You've stopped treating your energy like it's disposable. And in that discipline, you begin to notice a surprising new challenge: the need to protect your elevation. Because the higher you rise in spirit, the more distractions come cloaked in false alignment. Old habits try to reappear. Former cycles show up, looking refined. People from your past return with polished intentions. But now you see with spiritual eyes. Now you discern the assignment behind the disguise. You're not triggered anymore. You're trained. You're not shaken, you're centered. Because what used to confuse you now confirms your growth. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening?" You ask, "What is this here to teach or test?" And that shift alone changes the way you respond to everything. At this level, your greatest weapon becomes your stillness. Not silence from avoidance, but stillness from wisdom. You realize that not everything requires your response. Not every invitation deserves your presence. Not every opinion warrants your attention. You begin to preserve your energy like royalty, not out of arrogance, but because you finally understood that energy is currency. And as a chosen one, your energy is expensive. You don't spend it carelessly anymore. You invest it where there's growth, reciprocity, and alignment. And this recalibration may cause some people to misunderstand you. They may say you've changed down, they'd be right. But what they're really noticing isn't arrogance's awareness. You're no longer bending to keep peace that costs your peace. You're no longer overextending to maintain connections that no longer match your calling. And that shift will offend those who benefited from your lack of boundaries. But you don't owe them your old self. Oh God, your full self. The self He's been shaping, pruning, refining in secret. The one who isn't afraid to be misunderstood on the way to being fully aligned. And alignment isn't just about what you do, it's about what you no longer entertain. You lose your taste for gossip. Your patience for shallow conversation shrinks. Your appetite for validation dissolves. You start craving quiet, craving substance, craving truth. The music changes. The content you consume changes. The way you spend your mornings shifts. You no longer waking up just to survive the day. You waking up to steward the mission. Every hour feels intentional. Every step feels sacred. You're not hustling to a reviewer, flowing in obedience. And the more you trust that flow, the more you realize you're not behind. You're not late. You're not missing anything. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And that internal knowing silences every external doubt. You don't need outside reassurance because you've got inner revelation. You don't beg God for signs. You listen to what He's already been saying. You don't panic when plans shift. You trust the divine reroute. Because by now, you know the difference between delay and divine protection. And this level of spiritual maturity doesn't make your life perfect, makes your perception powerful. You begin to decode experiences in real time. That breakup, a redirection. That job loss, a repositioning. That closed door, a filter to keep you from stepping into a room you had no business entering. Everything begins to feel orchestrated, not chaotic. Not because life gets easier, but because your spirit is no longer resisting what your soul already knows. The resistance breaks, and in its place comes radical trust. A trust that says, even this is working for me. Romans 8:28 stops being a verse you quote and becomes a reality you live. And because of that, your energy shifts from grasping to receiving. You let go of needing to figure everything out. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to predict every outcome. You stop trying to play God in your own story. You return to your rightful place, surrendered, trusting, obedient. And in that surrender, something wild happens. You expand, not just spiritually, but emotionally, mentally, and creatively. Ideas begin to pour in. Strategy flows. Divine connections arrive. And it feels effortless, not because there's no work involved, but because it's in flow. You're no longer forcing open doors. You're walking through the ones that open when you show up as your true self. And when you show up that way whole, aligned, surrendered, the opportunities that arrive don't require you to shrink. They don't ask you to pretend. They demand your fullness. They are the exact match for who you've become. And the beauty of these divine assignments is that they don't exhaust you, they energize you. They don't confuse you, they confirm you. You no longer feel like you're constantly swimming upstream. You're moving with the current of purpose. And that current may not always be fast, but it's true. And that truth becomes your anchor in everything. And here's what might surprise you the most. You start to feel joy again. not fleeting happiness, not excitement from external validation, but deep, soul-level joy. The kind that shows up in quiet moments. Watching the sunrise, laughing with someone who sees you, creating something that feels like it came straight from your spirit. That joy isn't loud, it's holy. It doesn't depend on outcomes, it's rooted in presence. And the more you lean into it, the more you realize that joy isn't a luxury, it's evidence of alignment. Because when you're aligned, your life becomes a source of joy, not just for you, but for those around you. You become a reminder that peace is possible, that purpose is real, that God is still moving through ordinary people to create extraordinary impact. And your very existence becomes a testimony, not because of what you have, but because of who you've become. And that's what makes you dangerous to the enemy. Not your platform, not your following, but your clarity, your stillness, your unwavering faith. Because when you operate from alignment, you become impossible to manipulate. You stop being reactive. You stop being impulsive. You stop being ruled by fear. And fear is what the enemy counts on to keep you small. But now, you're awake. And not just spiritually, you're awake to yourself, to your patterns, to your power, to your purpose. And that kind of awareness makes you unstoppable, not because you're perfect, but because you're present. You're no longer pretending. You're no longer surviving. You're no longer silencing your spirit just to make others comfortable. You're here, fully, boldly, authentically, and you're moving in alignment with something greater than yourself. So don't let the quiet fool you. This isn't a season of waiting. It's a season of witnessing. Witnessing the manifestation of every hidden yes you whispered in the dark. Witnessing the fruit of every choice you made in obedience. Witnessing the arrival of the people, places, and plans that were always meant for you, but could only find you once you became the version of yourself who could hold them. And now you are. You've done the work. You've shed the layers. You've walked through the fire. And you've emerged, not broken, but born again. Not into religion, but into remembrance. The remembrance of who you are, whose you are, and why you're here. This is your moment. This is your frequency. This is your release. You not at the end of your journey, you standing at the doorway of your becoming. And this moment, right now, is not just significant because of what's ahead, but because of who you had to become to stand here. Look at the evidence. You survived what was meant to break you. You healed from what tried to hollow you out. You let go of what you once thought you couldn't live without. You chose truth over comfort, purpose over popularity, stillness over noise. And now, without fanfare or applause, you are finally aligned with the version of you that was always hidden under the layers of fear, people-pleasing and performance. And in that alignment, God begins to move differently through you. Not just in moments of worship or when you're speaking spiritual words, but in the small things, in how you respond, how you rest, how you walk into a room without needing to control it. There's power in the restraint. There's clarity in the pause. There's purpose even in the silence. And now you know how to hear God in all of it. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you chosen. UVA, come to understand that the fruit of your journey, ease and T, measured in accolades it, S, in your peace. It's in the way you no longer betray yourself just to belong, T. It's in the way you set boundaries. It S, in the way you no longer flinch at spiritual warfare, because you know what S on your life makes you a threat. You're not just sensitive, you're strategic. You don't just see spiritually, you move accordingly. Your discernment has been sharpened by disappointment. Your empathy has been deepened by betrayal. Your faith has been solidified by every unanswered prayer that turned out to be protection. And now, your presence is different, not because you're performing, but because you're anchored. You know who you are. You know who your source is. And you're no longer available for anything that requires you to shrink, to silence yourself, or to sacrifice your anointing just to fit in. This is what spiritual maturity looks like. This is what divine preparation produces. And now you feel it, this divine tension between contentment and calling. You're grateful, but you're also expectant. You're still, but you're not stagnant. There's something stirring in your spirit, and it's not impatience, it's readiness. Readiness to step into what you were designed for. Not because you've arrived at some finish line, but because you've aligned. And in that alignment, doors will open, not because you knock louder, but because your presence carries the key. You've become the access point. You're not waiting for opportunity. You are the opportunity. And people will feel it. Environments will shift. Chains will break. Clarity will come. Not because you say all the right things, but because you carry the right spirit. You've cultivated what the world can't counterfeit. You've built what algorithms can't measure. You've been entrusted with something holy, not to hoard, but to release. So now, the real question becomes, what will you do with all that you've remembered? Because awareness without action is just spiritual entertainment. And you, Warren T., brought through all of this to just know you, were brought through it to build, to create, to serve, to speak, to lead. Your testimony isn't just for healing, it's for harvesting. There are people who will find freedom because you had the courage to go first. There are lives that will change because you dared to tell the truth. There are atmospheres that will shift because you walked in carrying light where darkness used to dominate. And no, it won't always be glamorous. It won't always feel grand, but it will always be sacred. You are here to walk with God, not just talk about Him, to embody truth, not just post it, to live in love, not just preach it. And every single day you choose that path, especially when it's hard to break chains. You disrupt patterns. You change bloodlines. And Dan, to be surprised when you start to feel the resistance again, not because you off track, but because you're getting closer to the very thing you've been prepared for. The enemy doesn't attack what isn't a threat. But this time, you won't fold. You won't shrink. You won't second guess what you've been shown. You've already been tested. You've already been forged. You've already been chosen. And what God starts, He finishes. Philippians 1:6 says, "He who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion." That means your only job now is to stay obedient, to stay open, to stay available. Not for everything, but for what's yours, for what aligns, for what matches your frequency, for what honors your healing, for what reflects your growth. And anything less than that is beneath you, not because you're better, but because you're clearer. And this clarity is rare in a world full of noise. That's why your walk will confuse people. That's why your boundaries will offend. That's why your peace will trigger those still addicted to chaos. But that's none of your concern. You weren't built for crowd approval. You were built for kingdom impact. And kingdom work doesn't always come with recognition. Sometimes it comes with resistance. But that resistance only confirms your assignment. You're not being blocked. You're being built. And what God builds doesn't collapse. What God ordains doesn't need marketing. It carries its own momentum. It bears fruit in due season. And that's where you are now, in your due season. Not because you hustled your way here, but because you healed your way here. Not because you manipulated outcomes, but because you surrendered outcomes. And that surrender, that's what unlocked the flow. That's what positioned you to walk in Izana. The absence of effort, but the presence of grace. So if you're reading this and something in your spirit is rising, take it as confirmation. You're not crazy. You're not imagining this. You're not too sensitive. You're not asking for too much. You're just finally in tune. And because of that, life will never be the same again. You'll never be able to unknow what you now know. You'll never be able to unsee what you've now seen. You'll never be able to unfeel what you've now embodied. And that's a gift. That's the cost of clarity. That's the price of being chosen. But it's also the key to real freedom. Freedom from needing to be understood. Freedom from chasing false timelines. Freedom from dimming your light to make others comfortable. You're here now, fully, freely, faithfully, and everything that asks for you is already making its way into your life, not because you're striving, but because you're aligned. You've become the version of you that can hold the blessing without breaking. And for the first time, your soul is not just surviving, it's singing. This is the fruit of the hidden work. This is the reward of saying yes in the dark. This is the power of preparation. You weren't overlooked. You were obscured for a reason. You weren't delayed. You were developed. And now the light is green. The gate is open. The veil is lifting. You are stepping into everything that was already written for you before the foundations of the world. Not because you earned it, but because you answered it. And now the world gets to see what heaven already knew. You were never meant to fit in. You were always meant to lead others out. You're not just awakened. You're activated. You're not just called. You're commissioned. And this is only the beginning.